Okay, I think we're ready to begin. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Brad White. I'm the Director of Global Media Affairs for ICANN. We're going to be taking questions from three sources, as usual in most of our news conferences. Reporters in the room. I'm happy to say, for a change, we do have reporters in the room. Those who are joining online and those who are on the phone. As is usually the case on the phone, you're muted. If you want to ask a question, you hit #3. The conference operator will let me know you have a question. We'll unmute your phone and you can ask your question. With that, I'll introduce these gentlemen. Rod Beckstrom, our President and Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Stephen Crocker, Board Chair, Akram Atala, our Chief Operating Officer. With that, I don't know if you gentlemen have an opening statement or you want to go right into questions.
I have some very brief remarks. First, welcome to this press conference. We're obviously delighted to be here in lovely Prague, a stunning city, and appreciate the kindness and generosity of our local hosts. We do have one significant piece of news that we're sharing today here, and that is that the decision has been made, and ICANN meeting number 46 will be held in Beijing, China, the capital city, in April of next year, and that will be the first time in ICANN's history that we have met in the capital city of China, and we're very excited that that has broad-based support of many different parties in China, the government of China, CNIC, CONAC, the Internet Society of China, and that reflects yet another step forward in terms of deepening and enhancing ICANN's engagement with the Chinese internet community. And with that, I will turn it over to questions.
Let's start in the room. Anybody in the room? We're running short on mics, so I'm just going to run mine over. David? David, can you give us your name and organization?
David Goldstein, Domain News, Domain Pulse Freelance. I was just wondering about what the future of the digital archery was. Was it going to be, it's suspended now, but is it going to continue in the future, or are you going to introduce a new process for it?
It's to be determined. The Governmental Advisory Committee sent a letter to the Board of Directors of ICANN requesting that ICANN board have consultations with the community on the topics of digital archery and batching. And there are numerous discussions taking place this week, and it will depend on the feedback from the community where things go. And our chairman, Steve Crocker, may have additional points he wishes to share on that.
Thank you, Rod. This certainly is the essence of it, that decision has not been made, but will be looked at quite seriously. We are, of course, in the position that we now know how many applications we have, and so the decision processes that took place before that went down the path of choosing digital archery are now able to be revisited in light of both the knowledge of how many applications are coming and the new advice that is coming in from the GAC and from other quarters, GNSO and so forth. That's all that's appropriate to say at the moment, but we obviously are taking it quite seriously, and we'll go through a substantive process, not a pro forma process, to decide what the next step is.
We can take the next question.
Hi, Monica Ermert, Heise Online. You just said, Rod, that it was you received that letter of the GAC and that pulled the trigger. But in yesterday's session we understood, and even from the communication we understood that the reason was a technical problem with the system. So that would be my first one. But let me perhaps so you can collect the questions on the topic of the digital archery. Is a single badge something that you now consider really seriously? Is it feasible? Is it possible? You said it depends from the feedback from the community. And will we have the answer already on Thursday then on that? Or is there any other alternative that you are considering? And then I just might perhaps ask the question I asked last time. about the politicization. Perhaps, Rod, you can answer that. Over the time you have been the ICANN CEO, did you see a politicization of the ICANN work by countries, jurisdictions trying to enforce laws extraterritorially by, for example, I just give you the example, the domain seizures that we saw, just enforcing national law cross-border because you have a possibility to go to infrastructure providers sitting in your country. And is this a danger that you see going forward? I might come back.
Okay, let me take those one at a time. First is, I didn't refer to the GAC letter as a trigger. What I said was, the question was, it has been suspended, so what's going to happen next? Within that context, the GAC letter is relevant because it's a formal request of advice to the ICANN board to consult with the community, and so it needs to be done, and it obviously has a factor in this equation. So the system was taken online for the reasons stated online that you mentioned. With respect to the question of national policies, obviously ICANN has always supported an open, unified global internet consistent with the IETF principles and RFCs that have been developed for the domain name system. Different nation states do enact different laws and take different actions in their geographies, and I think that the ICANN community often engages, and members of the community, not necessarily under an ICANN moniker or as an ICANN body, work to help educate lawmakers on some of the trade-offs and some of the disadvantages of, for example, DNS filtering. And there are discussions in the community, even this week, there's a discussion, I think, on DNS filtering and blocking. So there has been growing pressure in many countries around the world to look at ways to regulate parts of the domain name system. I have not, I'll let Steve speak for the board. As CEO, I haven't seen any appreciable change in what we discuss or what we work on, which tends to be really the global the global DNS and the broader policies that affect all parties. But I think, hand it at this point over to Steve as chairman.
Thank you, Ron. So as many of you might be aware, I participated in an effort within the U.S. On a technical basis to advise, in cooperation with a quite distinguished set of co-authors, that what potential harms come from trying to institute DNS filtering as a way of controlling access to infringing sites that are offshore. So from a personal point of view, I think my views are pretty clear. At the same time, ICANN has not taken a specific position on this, and I think that's appropriate. Within the ICANN community, we now have activity within the Security Stability Advisory Committee trying to bring to light, to extend some of the ideas that we sketched out earlier on our technical white paper, and take into account comparable efforts in other countries as well, not just the U.S., and provide advice that is informative to policymakers. So it's in that sort of intermediate region where there is no ICANN position per se, and ICANN is not engaging in a political effort, but nonetheless the technical elements that underpin the adoption of such policies are very important, and within the ICANN community, as I said, we now have efforts to bring those consequences to light. And then the rest has to be part of a much broader international debate and debates within individual countries.
And Monica, if I may, you also had a question about one batch, the possibility of one batch or a single batch and its implications, and I think Akram can best speak to that.
Thank you, Rod. So one batch is feasible, of course. It depends on how what the community and the applicants would like to see us do. There are the alternative of multiple batches is that you will start seeing the passing applications out of a first batch, for example, earlier than you would see them if you do a whole batch. The timing is really what's the difference, and if everybody wants to wait till all the applications are processed, then a single batch could work as well. We have to figure out how things will go after the initial evaluation into pre-delegation and contracts, and as well as the delegation itself. So the only issue with one batch is that everything finishes at the same time and comes out at the same time, and then you have to depend on the natural trickling effects of these processes to allow things to come to delegation in smaller chunks. Otherwise, you'll see everything coming to delegation at the same time. So these are the issues that we're grappling with, and the Board GTLD committee is looking at all of that, is listening to the GAC, listened to the GAC yesterday, and they will be continuing their consultations with the community. And then when we get more information, I think they're going to sit down and deliberate on that, and we'll see what the outcome is. But everything is possible. I think everything is on the table. And as Rod said, we know more now about the applications. As Steve said earlier, we know more about the applications, the number, how many are in contention, which category they are. So there are a lot of things that we know that could enter into the decision now. So that will be deliberated soon. Thank you.
At this point, we don't have any questions queued up online or on the phone, so you guys basically own this. Next question. David?
Regarding the...
David, just for the folks online, can you just give us your name? And
David Goldstein again, Goldstein, Domain News, Domain Pulse, freelance. It's been put to me that I've lost it now. The problems with the GTLD process were foreseeable, and that there was no tender, no published requirements, no estimation of quality, and the resources weren't given. There weren't enough resources given to the process. I mean, you might have a different. You'll probably have a different view on that, but could it, without being a tender for the application for the GTLD application system, the TAS, for the whole processes involved, if that's correct, and the problems that came about, is there something you've learned from that process, and now you've got problems with digital archery? Could you have better planning processes in place?
Sure. The first thing I want to say is, having been involved in software development for 30 years, hindsight's 20/20. No one's made a credible argument to me that has, any knowledge of the technology and what we're dealing with that this was foreseeable. I think the team absolutely made best efforts to design a good system, test the system, et cetera. But Akram Attallah has that team reporting to him directly, so I'll let him expand.
Thank you, Rod. So it is regrettable that we had these glitches. It's not our finest moment to go through these things, and we have learned a lot from these incidents, and we are looking at doing a thorough review as well in our practices and processes, and make sure that we take them to the next level. But at the same time, I would like to, just make sure that we put things in perspective. Whenever you do testing, if you can envision the problem, you can test for it. If you cannot think of the test case, then it doesn't matter that you've done a lot of testing and you didn't cover that one test case. So it is unfortunate that these things happen, and we will place more rigor and more testing on our future products, and also make sure that we follow the best SDLC rules and processes. But if I go back in time and say, could we have done better? Sure, now in hindsight, of course. But I think that the team did a great job. They tested a lot. Testing is never done, so it is what it is. But the important thing is that moving forward, we're taking these lessons learned and we're implementing them for the future. Thank you.
And I also want to clarify, David, that we also made, as a result of this, management changes. And Kurt Pritz, Senior Vice President, is now acting in the role of running the new GTLD program.
Hello? Yes, sorry. Kieran McCarthy, .next. I have two questions. One with regard to that. What you say, Akram, doesn't square with the fact that you say the team did a great job, doesn't square with the fact that you fired the new GTRD program manager. My question, and the reality, as you know, is that the Kurt Pritz is currently, even in his current job, massively overworked. So what is the plan to get a new program manager, or what is the plan with regard to running this program and keeping the team that was there moving forward? And then the second question, rather than go back and forth, is more to you, Steve, with regard to the money that's there and the excess money that's there. How is it ring-fenced? You say it's ring-fenced, but how is it ring-fenced? Can we be certain that ICANN doesn't have expenses that then dip into that fund? And then, and you're holding it, I think, in a non-interest account. Could you explain the logic in that? And then also, do you have any commitments to, you say, well, we want to hear from the community, but that could hold many different options. Are there any commitments to, we will do this or we won't do this, so that people can feel confident that that money will be spent wisely?
So Kieran, the program director of the project resigned, and we are actively looking for a replacement. I would say, just as a guess, 3 months to 6 months, just because if we find somebody immediately, there is going to be some time before Kurt can step out of that. So during that time, we're going to need Kurt to do this. We're bringing more people from within the organization to help the new GTLD program, but also assist Kurt in his other duties. So we're all together. We're all, we're all a team, and we're going to make sure that we deliver on all of our initiatives, and we will step, based on priorities to make sure that the highest priority programs are in place. Just to see if you want me, I can address a little bit on the money issues. And then, when we say it's ring-fenced, the money for the new GTLD program is in separate accounts. The reason it is in separate accounts is exactly for that. We want to be very transparent on what we spend and where, so that when we give you reports on, the spending, it will be from these accounts only for new GTLD costs. That's one thing. The reason they are in non-interest-bearing accounts is because the U.S. government gives you 100% insurance for unlimited amounts if you're not earning interest on them when they are sitting in bank accounts. This will end by the end of the year. That's an FDIC insurance. In the process between now and before the end of the year, we are going to look at the amounts of money, and we're going to classify them as short-term, medium-term, longer term, and we're gonna figure out with the BFC what to do with the medium term and the longer term. So the shorter term, there is no need to go put it in a money, in some interest-bearing account or something like that. We'd rather take the security of the FDIC insurance. On the other two funds, we were going to discuss with the BFC what is the best place to put them, but the idea is to make sure that we do the fiduciary responsible thing for our constituents and the applicants on the monies. Okay.
We have one question online. What does ICANN think of companies who offer digital archery services for $25,000?
We have no opinion. We create, policies and programs for the community, and there's a lot of different activity out there by different entrepreneurs and business people, and we have no opinion on it.
Yeah, if I might, Kieran asked multiple questions, and we left one part hanging that I want to try to address, which is the disposition of the excess funds, and how do we know that we're not going to dip into those for current operating expenses and so forth, I think. I have said publicly in the past and reiterated that the surplus, however much it may be or may not be, will simply not be used for general operating expenses as the one part, and also that we will go through a careful process of making a decision about what to do. And there's any number of suggestions that have been put forth: create a foundation, give the money back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The commitment that we have so far is that we have fenced off that money, as you've heard, and put processes in place which are basically a parallel process to the existing financial management processes that we have. So we create budgets, we review what those budgets are, we assign expenditures, we audit the expenditures so that they're appropriate for the purpose, all of the usual business processes. The Board Finance Committee, which Akram referred to with respect to the placement of funds, is in charge of oversight of the budgeting process. The Audit Committee is in charge of making sure that the internal processes have been followed. And we, and I can tell you from my point of view, I haven't got a good idea yet as to what the ultimate magnitude of the surplus is. There is a figure that is out of our current estimate, which is $28 million, last I saw. This number will move up and down depending upon a lot of the uncertainties that come. How much money, the money that's set aside for dealing with potential risks, as those risks either do or don't materialize and increase or decrease over time, may have a significant effect, for example, trying to be very straightforward. So there's no immediate action that will take place, but there's no reason why we can't accumulate the ideas that various people have, and at the right times and the right places, engage in a dialogue, first in the abstract, absent knowledge of how much money we actually are going to deal with, and then as that becomes clearer, then a more pointed discussion along all that. So we look forward to doing that. It is not the most urgent item, of course, at the moment. We have a lot of things queued up. And the one thing, as I said, that we're not going to do is make a decision right now or even in the immediate future about the disposition of those funds. So we set the price, people put in their applications, they paid their fees. That's one of the things that is essentially settled business. And as Akram talked about the husbanding of the funds and making sure that they were treated very conservatively, the Board Finance Committee a few years ago explored ways of being very conservative in general with the funds that we have on hand, and shifted from a pretty conservative policy that still was aimed at a reasonable return on funds to an even more conservative posture that, from a business point of view, is probably less effective on yield, but even more protective so that we don't suffer losses. This is in the wake of the sharp economic downturn where we had to face, like every organization had to face. So we have the thought processes, the expertise, the mechanisms, the outside advisors, all of that in place, and are exercising those tools for to implement the policy that you've just heard.
Kieran, I saw you had another question, but let me take one online first. This is from Henry, who is with Computer Matrix in the Philippines. With the implementation of IPv6, will this have any significant impacts for sites, TLDs, or domains who are still using IPv4?
No direct effect. IPv4 is IPv6 is backward compatible with IPv4, but you know the reason for IPv6 is that we are running out of addresses in IPv4, and we expect people to start migrating to IPv6. So I hope that answers the question.
You still want to ask one? Mike's coming at you.
Thank you, Kieran McCarthy again. I'm sorry to drill in again on the money, but it's a very important issue. It's still uncertain to me what money can be spent on and not be spent on. You're talking about the risk element that was written in as a sum of 30 million that could easily increase, especially if you get sued, which is certainly possible. If ICANN got sued and you ended up with a huge legal bill, do you feel that you could take that money out of the GTRD accounts? It's not clear to me what you can do and not do. Is there anything to stop you from taking money at those accounts? What is the mechanism by which everyone will be able to see what is allowable to be taken out those accounts? Because it's something that will really concern people. And then I had a related question to that, something you said, Steve. Hang on. Oh, yeah, and what will be the mechanism by which you will decide to disperse it? So you don't have to say, well, we're going to do this, but will you run a PDP? You know, what ICANN mechanism will you run? Or can the board finance committee approve something and then board approves it and then it happens? What's going to be the system by which you're going to agree how you can spend the money?
So there's a couple of parts there, and I'm happy to address the parts as best I can, and then I think we'll probably have gone as far as we can go with this. The $30 million that you referenced was an estimate based upon 500 applications. We are setting aside, on the basis of that, we chose to set aside $60,000 out of every application. That money is considerably now larger than $30 million, and to acknowledge some of the questions that have been raised, does the risk rise directly in proportion to the number of applications, or is the risk constant across any number of applications? If you take the risk as constant across any number of applications, you say 30 million should cover you in all cases. If you say that the risk rises proportionate to the number of applications, then you have to set aside a portion of every application, sort of like an insurance premium. The initial step is that we've taken the latter approach of setting aside $60K per application, and so the amount that is set aside for that is 120 million or some number in that range. We will evaluate and reassess all of that on an ongoing basis and report fully, as I said. It is the purview of staff to carry out that analysis and to do that reporting. It's the purview of the Board Finance Committee to oversee that process and approve the budgets, and it's the purview, of course, of the Audit Committee to make sure that the processes are followed internally that support all of that. I don't see that there is a policy process involved here. The money that is set aside to cover risks is set aside to cover risks, and if there are expenses to be incurred that are attributable, properly attributable to the GTLD program, then that's where the money comes from. And at that level, it's basically one pot of money across all of the expense categories, including the surplus, and then it's a management process within that to report and control the expenses.
We've got another online question from Jamie Rishaw. I hope I don't mangle that name too much. This may be an elementary issue, but has ICANN considered, with a possible flood of new GTLDs, a standardized global policy in regard to zone file access, seeing as it's almost impossible now to obtain resources with current registrars? Many issues from open records to the security of the DNS can and likely will present themselves.
We will get back to Jamie on that, to look into the details. Thanks.
Michelle?
The same advice that Mike Roberts, the first CEO of ICANN, gave to me when we sat down in our little tiny rental space in Palo Alto before we were able to build out an office. And Mike Roberts said, Rod, I just want you to know this. No matter what you do during your term at ICANN, you will be criticized. Just keep focusing on what needs to be done and get it accomplished. And no truer words have been spoken. So I'm just going to pass along the wisdom and advice of Mike Roberts. Thank you.
The gentleman from AFP.
Thank you. Jan Flemmer, AFP. I'm wondering about Beijing being picked as the venue for next year's meeting. Why this choice, and shall we expect a strong focus on IDNs? Thanks.
Sure. We have an open process for selecting the ICANN cities in the sense that we request proposals from potential hosts around the world. And my Vice President of Communications, Barbara Clay, can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we had 4 proposals. How many proposals this time for Asia meeting? 4. We had 4 proposals for the Asia meeting, of which China's was one of the parties, the applicants in China, and it simply was a very strong proposal. And clearly, the fact that 25% of the internet users in the world live in China, I think the current estimate is 550 million internet users in China, and growing at a fairly rapid rate. It simply makes a lot of sense. And particularly being in the capital city, that's very significant for the ICANN community and for the Chinese civil society, governments, and industry, because it gives a lot of them an opportunity to have access to attend the event. And that's an advantage of being in capital cities. And as I've said before, I hope that ICANN will have a meeting. We've had one in Brussels. We've had one in other capitals. I hope ICANN will have one in Washington, D.C. someday, just because it would give a lot of politicians and government staff members in the United States firsthand exposure to the multi-stakeholder model at work. So we see many benefits of being in China. Obviously, it's a great city. There's tremendous culture and heritage. It's got to be one of the most exciting cities in the world, with all the new technology and buildings and development going on there that very much fits with the theme of the internet and ICANN. So we're really excited to be headed there. And it builds on this growing, increasing engagement with the Chinese internet community that we've been working on very actively for the last 3 years. It's a nice next step. 6 applicants for hosting the Asia meeting, yes. And there were, deliberations by staff on this, recommendations to some board committees, and then the decision was made and approved by the board here unanimously on Saturday. Certainly, IDNs will be, and I mean, as those who've watched the variance research project, variants are the little differences in how there's different versions of language scripts across either language groups or geographic borders, et cetera. It's a very complex program, and some of the very excellent research done in the variant study that we kicked off roughly 18 months ago was done in China, in Beijing, and there's been an expression of interest by those academic parties to contribute even more going forward. And it was also, I should note, just a wonderful spirit of collaboration with parties all across Asia on the Chinese language variant issues. So I think IDNs will certainly be on the agenda and be discussed there.
We have a question online. Can you provide an overview on the Objection Dispute Resolution Program for GTLDs? How can we be sure the process is fair and not biased toward organizations of considerable size and location?
The objection processes can be done by any party that has standing, and that is defined, I believe, per the objections. And anyone in the world can comment online for free on any and every single application if you'd like, and we encourage people to do that. Please go to the website. If you like a proposed string, you can state that. If you object or oppose for any reason, please share that view. That's open to everyone in the world, and we hope that parties will do that. The panels who will consider the objections are independent, and they're world-recognized panels and experts in their fields and area, and size doesn't matter. I mean, they're not going to consider they'll analyze the objections on the merits of the issue. Now, having said size doesn't matter, and the issue of community definition, it does. So there's many community criteria, and one of those has to do with how well you represent that community and how engaged you are with it. So when I said size doesn't matter, what I mean is the size of the party filing the objection. I don't believe it is going to be a key factor, unless it should be a factor in their analysis.
At this point, we have no other questions queued up online or on the phone, so Monica?
Hi, I have hate to open another bucket, but we have just ongoing the session on the Registrar Accreditation Agreement. Could you perhaps give us a timeline for that? How far are you advanced? And might it be necessary to split the thing, because you have a lot of things that there seems to be agreement, but you have some things that you have heavy disagreement, and the process seems to be stuck in a way.
I can give you a high-level overview. If we want to go to the next level of detail, we'll need to consult with Kurt Pritz or one of the people sort of shepherding that through the organization. It's also obviously a multi-party discussion. There's ICANN and the organization as a party in the discussion. There's the registrar's constituency as a stakeholder in the discussion. There's law enforcement as a stakeholder in the discussion. There's civil society. And ultimately, there'll be the ICANN board will make final decisions on what we do or what we don't do. I think that discussions are progressing, but I'm not prepared to get into the details at this time of where it is. You ask whether it's possible to split it out. Certainly anything's possible, but I think the desire of most of the parties at this time is to try to get to a successful conclusion that enhances the quality and the protections under the RAA in a number of different ways. So again, very happy to introduce you, Monica, to Kurt Pritz, Senior Vice President, who's working on that issue.
David?
Another question on digital archery, because I think it goes a lot about the transparency of the organisation. With when you look at what the problems were and how to go about them, well, do you have any comments to make about that now, or are you going to wait until you do a review of the processes, and how much of that review will be made available to the public, like to be transparent?
So on the digital archery, we will, of course, do the review and make sure that we have the information available for everybody to see. It's part of our transparency. The problems are really issues of stability of the system. We had less than 20% of the applicants who actually did took their aim and did their shot on the digital archery, and we had only less than 5 or 6 days left in the program, and we were expecting that with the instability that we're seeing, that we would expect to see some more instability as everybody comes in to finish their shot. So we were, instead of keeping it open and getting results that we're not so confident with, we took the option of suspending the program until we also take advantage of the consultations that were going on, so that we can get a formed opinion and then decide on how to move forward and whether we continue the program or go a different route. So that's the plan right now.
They invested. A very short follow-up with the people who did it already. They invested in that. What will happen to their investment? It was just bad luck, so to say.
Well, let me just talk about the new GTLD program in general. Applying for a new GTLD is not, there's no right to get that top-level domain. And there's been no specific commitment to when even specific decisions might be made. ICANN's role is to help manage the evolution, the stable and secure evolution of the domain name system, and to, through the community, develop policies, and with community consultation, develop programs and implementation, which is what ICANN does. The individual actions of businesses around that are completely outside of ICANN's control. And that's the same for other policy decision-making bodies and other governance structures. So we don't look at the chosen investments of parties. That's all entirely up to them.
Thank you. Kieran McCarthy again. There was a question earlier about TRD. This is my question, but just a note, which I don't think was particularly clear, and they were talking about getting access to the TRD root zones. There was a project underway. At the moment, it's very piecemeal and very difficult to do. There was a project underway to make that a single process that ICANN would develop and put across, which I actually think will be enormously helpful, particularly with this large number of GTLDs. So I don't know whether that was clear, but that's how I understood the question, and it's a big question. But my actual question is with regard to the RAA. When it originally started this fast-track RAA negotiations, the plan was that it would be you would have a new RAA for the Costa Rica meeting, which was a few months ago. And then that didn't happen for whatever reason. And I remember asking the question at Costa Rica, and you say, well, we're fairly confident that we'll have it done by the next meeting. So I said, well, what happens if you haven't? And I think you said, well, I don't know. We'll see. So we're here again, and the question is again, what happens if it's not done by the next meeting? Can this go on indefinitely? What's the point where you break this ongoing cycle? Also, from what I'm hearing from the registrars, what they say their concern is that ICANN is being very stubborn and saying it's all or nothing. You've got to take everything we put down or nothing at all, and that's where the sticking point is, and they're saying, well, some of these are not reasonable. And that's where I understand the negotiations are breaking down. So any comment you have on that?
Certainly after Dakar, when there was quite direct input from the GAC to the board about how long the negotiations had been going on and the lack of progress with respect to addressing law enforcement concerns, the board was strongly concerned about this and focused attention and asked that we see progress as rapidly as possible. Your recitation of the sequence is essentially right, that there was an expectation to be done by Costa Rica and didn't get completed, and now here. We, at the board level, in a short while, not today, but sort of probably in a few weeks, when things are settled down after this meeting and ACRM is fully in place, we'll ask for a clearer picture of where things stand. It's a complicated business because in broad terms, law enforcement wants a whole set of things that they think are helpful to their cause. There's two contrary forces, one from civil society that worries about whether law enforcement goes too far, and then from the registrars, from at least a business perspective, if not a values perspective, of saying, well, these things are expensive and would materially change the business. What has to happen, whether it's sooner or later, is the supporting information has to come to the surface. How effective are these measures with respect to what it is they're trying to accomplish, and how expensive are they in fact, and so forth. So I would like to see, and I'll just speak for myself, I would like to see both the registrar community and the law enforcement community provide not just what their requests or their postures are in this, but also a much richer base of information, so that we have, to use the current lingo, evidence-based decisions and evidence-based policies. I had the pleasure of meeting with the law enforcement contingent that's here last evening, and had this conversation with them. I've had occasional conversations with some of the registrars, and I don't really want to get in the middle of all those negotiations. It's just sort of a posture of there are real problems that have to be addressed and legitimate conversations that have to take place, and let's get to it. And some of these we can do in the short run, and some of them will take longer time as we bring the research and evidence gathering into the process.
We've got time for one more question, then we got to get these guys out of here. Last question? No? Oh, Monica, we had to twist your arm. How unusual. Monica wants to ask a question.
Hi, one question back to the let's say general technical excellence that was the incoming CEO spoke about this. How, from the experience that you now gathered, is there anything that you would say can help you? Let's say, don't give all this software work to the outside. Don't outsource it. Do more yourself. Or are there any lessons that you would say you took from there?
So definitely there are a lot of things that we can put in place and improvements from the learnings when you look back and you say, okay, what were the decisions that were made? One of the main things on the program is that it was a long program that was starting when the expectations were much smaller. So originally, I think the team, when they decided on the course of the software development, were considering 300 applications. So you start there, and then things take a long time, and you end up with a different kind of program. And so there are a lot of different issues that led to this, but definitely there are certain things we can do and put in place and to improve where we are, especially looking at the future from today instead of from 3 or 4 years ago. So we are doing some reviews. We are looking at assessing how we do things, and as we do all of this, we're going to put in place a better structure moving forward to get more quality and then more rigor in the way we release code and we get things done. So definitely.